Hello and welcome to Freed Indeed Live. I'm your host, Kevin J.N. Hughes. And as you can see, I'm not in my normal office. That's because I'm actually at Grace Matters today. And I had a little bit of time today, and for various reasons, I know I'm going to need to do things the next couple Saturdays. So I wanted to pre-record something for you guys while I'm here, and I was thinking about this topic for today, the wisdom of God. Now, I was thinking about this topic because I recently had a group of independent Seventh-day Adventists come into my direct message and in one of my social media platforms, and they challenged me regarding Proverbs 8, because this particular group of Seventh-day Adventists believes that Jesus Christ is not divine. And the way they argue for that belief is pr primarily rooted in Proverbs chapter 8. And after talking with them for a while, it became apparent that they were just kind of trolling, so I moved on and stopped engaging with them and all of that. But it did get me thinking because I remembered this book has a really awesome section on the wisdom of God, and I never, I know we did our whole series going through this book, and I love that series very much. It's one of my favorite series that I've ever done. But one of the things that I like to do is go back, and this book has so much rich depth to it that I think it's good to keep going back and examining some of the sections in the book. It's kind of like Dr. Jeannie's book, Thinking Orthodox, how I've gone through a couple times now different sections of that book that have something really valuable. So I'm going to go through, and I think what I'm going to do for this is because it's not a super long section, I'm just going to actually read the Wisdom of God section and pause at various points to share my own thoughts and my own commentary. But for the most part, I'm just going to let Father Stephen DeYoung speak. So a little bit of free advertising for Father Stephen here. Um, the wisdom of God. So this is the Religion of the Apostles, starting on page 23, the wisdom of God. In addition to identifying Jesus Christ as the second person of Yahweh in ways that were consistent with the appearance of the word of the Lord in Hebrew scriptures, St. John, in his prologue, also draws on a parallel set of traditions from the same scriptures that understood the second person of the God of Israel to be the wisdom of God. Understanding this tradition and its import for early Christology links Christian concepts of the relationship between Christ and the Father on the one hand and Christ and creation on the other. So that's significant. So we know that Jesus is the union of, so in a lot of Protestant theology, and indeed to some degree in Orthodox theology, we talk about the idea of God, of the creator creature distinction, as people call it. Um, but what I have often in the last 5 years or so, what I've often liked to say is that God himself has actually transcended the creator creature distinction through the incarnation. This is the mystery of the incarnation. And Proverbs 8, one of the things that's really cool about Proverbs 8 is that it helps to show us the understanding of Christ's relationship to his Godhead, as well as Christ's relationship to, in the incarnation, to the created sphere. Much of this tradition centers on the personification of wisdom in Proverbs 8, which is grammatically feminine. In which grammatically feminine terms are used. The central portion of this passage features wisdom proclaiming, Yahweh possessed me in the beginning of his way, from before his works, from eternity, from the beginning I have been established, from before there was an earth. When there was no abyss, I was brought forth. When there were no fountains pouring forth waters. Before the mountains were set in place, before the hills I was brought forth. When he had not yet made the earth or the fields or the first of the dust of the world, when he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the abyss, when he established the clouds above, when he strengthened the fountains of the abyss, when he assigned to the sea its limit so that the waters would not trespass his command, when he marked out the foundations of the world, then I was beside him, a master craftsman, and I was his delight, rejoicing before him by day and by night always. Proverbs 8:22 to 30. The verbs translated as possessed and brought forth have a more ambiguous meaning in Greek than they do in English and can imply creating or making. This argument was used by proponents of Arianism to argue, and indeed by those SDAs I was talking about, to argue that Christ came into existence at a specific point, albeit before the rest of creation. So they argue that he's Jesus, or that he is Michael the Archangel, that Jesus is Michael the Archangel, and therefore was not eternal. Not all Arians argue that, obviously, but these particular SDAs do. Um, This interpretation, heretical though it may be, reveals that by the 4th century, when Arius was preaching, the above passage was firmly connected to the second person of Yahweh and to Christ. The Arian reading of Proverbs 8 was at best a misinterpretation. The Hebrew verbs in question do not directly indicate a coming into being of someone who did not previously exist. So that's an important point. This isn't saying that the figure we're talking about didn't exist prior to this. It's saying brought forth or possessed. In verse 22, the verb possessed, kana, was used often in regard of commerce to convey buying and acquiring property. It can also refer to property that has already been acquired. The Phoenician cognate makna refers to property or wealth. Its most important biblical usage, however, is in Genesis 4:1, where Eve uses this verb to say that she acquired a son from Yahweh. So why is Proverbs using this language to describe the second person of the Trinity, someone who is eternal? Well, it's because the language in the original language, it's more ambiguous. It's not necessarily like in English, if we say brought forth, that sounds like coming into being. But that's not actually the way that it's being used in the original language. It's being used to denote sonship, yes, but not necessarily an origin point, like a point of time. So what makes this usage important is the parallel in Proverbs 8 between the verb describing the relationship between Yahweh and wisdom and the verb used in 24 and 25, here translated brought forth. The verb chul literally means to writhe or twist, usually in pain. Its most common application, particularly within the writings of the prophet Isaiah, is to childbirth. The parallel of these two verbs in this text reveal the relationship between Yahweh and wisdom of begottenness. The Son is begotten of the Father before any creation came into being. The text is, in fact, the origin of the teaching of the Church that Christ was begotten by the Father or begotten of the Father before all worlds. Well, several texts in the New Testament apply the Greek term monogenes to Christ, see John 1:18 and 3:16. This Greek term is better translated unique or one and only rather than only begotten. The prologue of St. John's Gospel draws directly on the themes of Christ's involvement in creation expressed here in Proverbs. So this is an important, this is also important. So when it says only begotten, that's better translated as unique or one and only rather than as literally begotten. Um, because again, we're not talking about an origin point. We're not talking about a point in time in which the Son, who previously was not, now exists, but we're talking about a relationship of sonship between the Father and the Son. The prologue to St. John's Gospel draws directly on the theme of Christ's involvement in creation expressed here in Proverbs. His statement that the Word was in the beginning not only refers to the opening words of Genesis, but also parallels the language of Proverbs 8:22. That the Word was in the beginning with alongside God parallels verse 30. That all things were made by him, and without him nothing was made that was made. 1:3 draws on the portrayal of wisdom as a master craftsman working alongside Yahweh during the days of creation recounted by Proverbs. St. John thereby presents Christ as the Logos become flesh in multiple senses. He is not only the figure of the Word of Yahweh seen by the fathers in the Hebrew Scriptures, but also the Logos and the plan and structure of all creation. He is the one in whom all created things find their origin, their purpose, and their perfection. St. Paul can therefore call him the wisdom of God, 1 Corinthians 1:24, and say that in him all things hold together, Colossians 1:17. Though he is begotten, he did not come into being from not being. Rather, he has the status of firstborn of all creation, Colossians 1:15. And Colossians 1:15, we know that firstborn, um, in that context, it's actually using the term firstborn to mean preeminent. So it's not necessarily meaning firstborn as in he was literally born first, implying a point of origin, but rather he's firstborn because he is the preeminent one. So I hope that all of that has been helpful. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments. If you are from that Seventh-day Adventist group and think that Jesus Christ is Michael the Archangel and is a created being, and if you're using Proverbs 8 for that, you can, if you believe that, then you can share with me other passages that you think prove this, and we can talk about it. Um, but if Proverbs 8 is your main proof text for this concept, then you can now see why that's flawed linguistically as well as conceptually within Proverbs 8. So thank you very much for watching. Please share this with your friends so that they too can be freed indeed. God bless.